Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be doing another try a chapter tag, but this time with a twist. One of my goals for 2017 is to get my TBR down to 30% of my library, and one of the ways that I'm planning on doing this is to do my TBR shelf unhaul series, which I'll leave linked up in the cards. But another way that I kind of thought of to attempt to reduce the size of my TBR is this video. Because as I've mentioned in other videos, occasionally I will look over my TBR shelf and I will pull books off that I'm not sure I'm still really interested in, and I'll put them in a pile, and if I kind of decide that I want them back on my shelves, I'll put them back. And typically those books just sit in a pile until I decide that I want to unhaul them. But today I'm going to try a different method of dealing with these books. I went through my TBR shelf and I pulled off books like I normally would for a possible unhaul, but instead of just leaving them in a stack, I'm going to be reading the first chapters of them and deciding whether or not I keep them based on that first chapter. Now you may think this is a little harsh, but these are already books where I'm questioning my interest in reading them, and the first chapter will give me some sort of feel for the book overall. And another of my kind of unspoken, like back of my mind reading goals for 2018 is to only put time and energy into things that I'm really interested in reading, which might seem a little counterintuitive given that I am doing the TBR shelf unhaul and reading books that have been sitting around forever that I'm not necessarily the most interested in reading. But because I'm doing that, any books that I read in addition to that are going to be probably a lot fewer than the ones I'm reading for that series, and therefore I only want to pick up the ones that I'm really, really interested in. So if I read the first chapters of these books and they don't grab me, why waste my time with them? So yeah, without any further ado, I believe I have 10 books sitting in front of me, so I'm going to show them to you really quickly. A bind up of Full Metal Alchemist volumes 1 through 3. Essentially, this is a super popular manga series that I have been interested in, but I'm not sure that the actual premise of the story is that intriguing to me. I've just heard about it a lot. And I do also have this, which is the bind up of 4 through 6, which if I get rid of the first one, I will also get rid of this one, but I'm not going to read it since, you know, this is the second in a series. Next is The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. Now, I am slightly more optimistic about this now that I am reading 1Q84, but this just sounds really odd, and I'm not sure it's necessarily that intriguing to me. And yes, I know that I bought this over the summer, but I don't know. We'll see what I think about it after the first chapter. Next is Morning Glories Volume 1. Honestly, I've just heard kind of mediocre things about this, and I'm not sure it's something that I want to invest my time into. Next is Fables Volume 1. Again, this is something that I've heard fairly average things about, and I'm not sure that the art style is necessarily my favorite, so I'm not sure how I actually am gonna feel about this. Next is Fairy Tale Volume 1. Again, this is a series that I think I've heard overall pretty good things about, but I think I bought this just because it was one of those series that I hear about constantly, and I kind of gave into the hype a little bit. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily something I'm interested in, and honestly, I don't remember the premise very much, so we'll see. Next is Love Story by Jennifer Eccles. I got this last year because I liked another Jennifer Eccles book, and I was in a contemporary mood, but I didn't read it when I was in that mood, and I feel like this type of story isn't necessarily my thing anymore. I might still enjoy that story that I read from junior high because it's nostalgic, but I'm not sure this is the type of thing that I would read for the first time now and enjoy. Next is A Clockwork Orange. Now, this is one that I actually bought for class, and I didn't want to read it as quickly as we had to for class because I wanted to like read it and savor it, but I've had it for 4 years now and I still haven't read it, so I'm not really sure how interested I actually am in this. Next is Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld. This is one that I was super intrigued by like around its release and for the first like year afterward, but since then my interest has really waned and I'm not sure I still want to read this. Next is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is one that I saw forever because this cover is gorgeous, and I bought it last year when I was in my nonfiction kick, and then I proceeded to start it and never finish it because I kind of got out of the nonfiction mood, and the first chapter didn't really grab me, so I'm gonna reread that first chapter, but I think this, out of all of them, is the one that I'm most confident that I'm going to get rid of, despite how beautiful this cover is. And finally, the last one in here is The Walled City by Ryan Grodin, still not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but this is one that I actually got over the summer, so shame on me for buying something that I'm not sure I actually want to read, but it's one of those books for me where the premise sounds really intriguing, but for some reason practically I just don't want to pick it up. I'm not sure why, but we'll check out the first chapter and see what I think. Enough rambling, I'm going to read these in a random order and I will get back to you after each first chapter. So I just finished the first chapter of the Full Metal Alchemist bind-up, and I enjoyed it. I'm not going to give my thoughts on what I'm keeping until the end of the video, but I'm not sure which way I'm leaning in this so far. I thought it was interesting, but I'm not sure if it interested me enough to invest time into the whole series. I mean, obviously, if I were to read this whole thing or to just read onward in the series, I would get more invested, but I'm not sure that what I read up to this point is interesting enough for me to want to continue on knowing how long the series is. Like I said, largely the reason I picked this up was because I kept hearing about this and Attack on Titan a lot, and I heard that this one was a little bit better for newcomers to manga, and this was back a few years ago, so I was a newcomer to manga, and I mean, it's not necessarily what is right up my alley. I'm sure that this comparison isn't apt, and I'm probably just comparing two things that aren't actually that similar, but for some reason, whenever I think of this, it makes me think of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like I said, I don't even know if there are any similarities between the two, and I just know that, like, the characters have powers, and for some reason, I just think of them similarly. And Avatar: The Last Airbender was never a show that I was super interested in, and therefore I kind of put that disinterest onto the series for some reason. I know that it's not the most sound logic, I know that it doesn't make that much sense logically, but it's just what my brain does, and so therefore it makes me question whether or not I'm interested. I'm sure that didn't make sense, but that's just the way that my mind thinks about this for some reason. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I will think about it while I'm reading the other chapters, and I'll let you know at the end. So I've just finished part of the first chapter of Fairy Tale. Now, this first chapter was like 90 pages, so I wasn't gonna read the whole thing. So I read like the first 30 pages or so, and it's all right. I am gonna be perfectly honest. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna keep this. It's nothing specific. I think just the general overall tone and vibe of this just isn't jiving with me. And plus, especially since the series is super mega long, the fact that I have such meh feelings about it right now just means that there's no way I'm ever gonna read the whole thing, so I'm feeling like this is gonna be getting unhauled. So I just read the first chapter of Love Story by Jennifer Eccles, and honestly, I kind of loved it. I wasn't expecting to really enjoy that first chapter, but I kind of loved it. It was definitely super cheesy, but I think that I just am slow to admit that I kind of like cheesy things. But yeah, I enjoyed this first chapter. I liked it definitely a lot more than I thought I would, and I kind of wanted to continue on to a second chapter, so I might keep this. I'm not sure. So I'm back after reading the first chapter of Morning Glories, or what I think is the first chapter. It doesn't really have chapter distinctions, just like picture page distinctions. Anyway, I think it was the first chapter, and I was like oddly intrigued. This is probably one of the ones that I thought I would be least interested in, but after reading this first chapter, like, I'm kind of digging it. It was really twisted, really dark, but I really enjoyed it. Right at the beginning, I was super iffy, but the more I read, the more intrigued I was. So I'm not 100% sure, but I might end up keeping this. That said, super confused as to what's going on. It's a little bit more weird than I typically go for, and like not weird in a good way. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, I don't know. I am still a little bit iffy about this, and typically when I'm iffy about like comic series, it doesn't usually go super well. So I might keep this and read the first volume and then make up my mind from there, but I'm not super sure. So I'm back after finishing about the first chapter of The Strange Library. Honestly, this chapter designation is weird, as to be expected with books by Murakami, and I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm honestly very torn about this because I think that this is a really cool copy of the book. I love that it's got this cool flap, and the reading of this actual book is very unique. But I'm not sure that the story is my thing. In fact, I'm fairly confident that the story is not my thing. Like, when I reread the back of the book, it sounds super intriguing and I want to keep it. And when I look at this cool formatting, it's super intriguing and I want to keep it. But as I was reading, I didn't want to keep reading. Part of me wants to keep it and give it a chance again later, but part of me just thinks, what's the point? It's just got interesting formatting. I don't know. I'll think about it. So I've just finished reading the first chapter of Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld, and it was intriguing, but I don't think it really grabbed me. Like, it wasn't bad by any means, and I've probably read less interesting things tonight, but nothing about it really, like, urged me to read anymore. I don't know. Also, because of the structure of this book, I actually read 2 chapters. The first chapter was about a writer, and then the second chapter is the book that she's writing or has written, and it alternates chapters like that. So I wanted to get a good feel for both the writer's story and for the story that she wrote. I'm not sure I necessarily got a good idea of the writer's story because it was a lot shorter than the actual book that she wrote, but I did read both. Like I said, no strong feelings here, no like strong urges to continue, but it was interesting what I read, and I'm definitely not going to write that off. I don't know how I feel about this at this point. This is another one where I think I'm going to have to think about it a little bit while I am reading the other chapters. Okay, to be perfectly honest, I'm back after reading literally the first page, not even the first page, of A Clockwork Orange. I wanted so badly to like this because I lately have been into a lot more adult fiction, even some like slightly older books. This is a bit older than the ones that I've been interested in, but I've been interested in more literary leaning things, and so I was really hoping I would love this, but less than a page in and I was already frustrated with the terminology. I'm honestly not sure of the specifics, but if you're not aware, a lot of the terminology in here is specific to the book. I believe, based on a Wikipedia thing that I looked up, that a lot of it is based on Russian, but basically these people almost speak a different language than ours, and so if you want to understand the book, you have to constantly look up what this terminology means, and I'm sure that for some people that's like a cool, like, hunt and find type thing. I don't know. Like, it makes them feel intellectual, but I don't think I will ever have the patience to do that for a book, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to get through this. Like I said, 1 page in, and I tried to look up the terms and like get through it, and it was just frustrating. There were some that were like really obvious and I could tell what it meant just by context, but some where it just didn't make sense in context and I had to look it up, and I just don't have the patience. So I think that this is probably going to be one that goes. Plus, I've seen the movie and I really don't know how different the book and the movie are, but I don't really want to get my way through this entire book having to like basically translate it for myself just for that story. So I think this is probably one that's gonna have to go. I'm back after reading and somewhat skimming the first chapter of Fables Volume 1. As you can assume from the fact that I said I skimmed a bit, I was mildly interested in this, but like not overly interested in this. If you're unaware of the premise of this, essentially it takes place, I believe, in New York City, and it centers around a bunch of fairy tale characters who are living in modern day New York, or like modern day New York when this was written. I'm not sure when it was published, but and it deals with them like maintaining their secrecy in like the public world. And I guess that this just isn't a concept that intrigues me like it did when I first heard about it and first picked up this volume. Like, I'm a pretty big fan of mystery novels, but I'm not always a huge fan of like police officers or detectives solving mysteries, and that's what this is. So I'm just not sure that this is really up my alley right now. That said, I did definitely enjoy the art more than I expected to, but I just think the concept isn't probably something that I'm still super intrigued by. I'm back again after reading the first chapter of Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book is oddly divided up, so I read the first few sections of it. I think that it was only a few sections of a chapter, but I'm honestly not sure. I wasn't intrigued enough to read more. Honestly, I think that I mostly bought this because of the cover, and while I'm not uninterested by the material in here, I feel like it's not necessarily something that I personally need to hear. Not to toot my own horn, but I feel like some of the stuff she's talking about, at least in this first section, is stuff that I already am kind of aware of. For example, she talks about how to be a creative person and to be happy with your creativity in your life, you don't necessarily have to like quit your job and become an author. You can introduce it into your life in different ways, and that's like something that I already understand and do a lot. And I don't know, I mean, that's just like a little minor thing, and obviously it's an entire book, but like I feel like I'm not sure I'm gonna get anything out of this if I keep reading. The long and short of it is basically I don't read a ton of nonfiction, and if I were to pick up nonfiction, it would be something that I feel like I would gain something from. And with this, I feel like it's trying to tell me how to be a creative person or how to be creative in my life. And I feel like I'm already happy with the way that I'm creative in my life. Like I've got a lot of stuff going on that I really enjoy. So I think that it's not something that I need right now. Skimming through some of the different sections of this book, I'm kind of getting that same vibe from the rest of the book. So I think you can already assume what I'm going to do with this, but I'll not talk about it until after I finish the last one. So I'm back again after finishing the first chapter of The Walled City by Ryan Groudon. I'm going with Groudon. I think that makes a little bit more sense. Anyway, the first chapter was actually pretty short. I actually almost read the first 3 chapters because it has 3 different perspectives in the book, and I was going to try to get a feel for all 3 perspectives, but I decided not to. This first chapter was fast-paced and interesting, but I'm not necessarily sure that it was enough for me to be like fully interested in it. I honestly just don't have super strong opinions on this first chapter. Like, I could see myself reading more, but I also don't find myself like really wanting to read more of this. And yes, it is just the first chapter and it is very short, but like I said, this was already one that I was questioning reading in the first place. So I don't know about this one. Okay, so I have finished all 10 of the first chapters, and as I've been doing this, I've been separating them into 3 piles. Obviously, a keep, a get rid of, and an I'm not sure. And it ended up that 8 of the books fell in either the keep or the get rid of, and 2 fell into the unsure. So I'm gonna go to the keep and get rid of before I go to the unsure pile. Because to be perfectly honest, I'm still kind of unsure as to what to do with those 2. So I'm going to start out with the keep pile, which has a grand total of 2 books in it. But I'm actually very surprised at which 2 books they are, because I, going into this, probably would have expected them to be like definite get rid ofs. And those 2 books are Love Story and the first volume of Morning Glories. Something about these first sections just really grabbed me. I think that the Morning Glories first chapter was just so bizarre that I was really curious, and the Love Story one was just kind of addicting. It's one of those books that I could really see myself just sitting down and binge reading. Definitely cheesy, just like her other book is that I read, but definitely still something that I can see myself enjoying. And then there are 6 books in the get rid of pile, so rather than holding them all up, I'm gonna run through them one by one. The first one is the first volume of Fairy Tale. This just didn't really intrigue me that much. This is probably the one that I am like most confident that I want to get rid of. Next is Afterworlds. This one just didn't really compel me or grab me in any way, so I'm getting rid of it. I take back what I said before. A Clockwork Orange is probably one I'm most confident in getting rid of. This one just, I can't see myself putting the energy into it. Next is Fables Volume 1. This is one that was alright, but I skimmed most of the chapter because it's just not something I'm really interested in anymore. Another one that I feel really great about getting rid of is Big Magic. This is just not one that I can see myself picking up because I don't think it's going to help me very much. And finally, the last one in the stack is The Walled City. This one is probably the most interesting to me of this stack, but I just, for some reason, don't find myself really interested in this, and I know that a large chunk of the reason that I bought this is because I really like the cover. So I think that I'm getting rid of this. So this, of course, leaves me with 2 more books, and those are Full Metal Alchemist Volume 1 and The Strange Library. To be perfectly honest, I still don't know what I want to do with these 2. I think that The Strange Library is not something that really interests me to pick it up. I read the first like 5 little sections and I wasn't compelled by any part of the story, but I keep returning to this cool format and the synopsis on the back, or like the summary on the back, and the fact that I'm currently reading and enjoying 1Q84 by Murakami. Part of me wants to keep it and read it because it's super short and I have this really cool format, but part of me also just doesn't want to waste my time with this, and I feel like now that I've read this first section and I know that it's not something that super intrigues me, I am like gonna go into it with negative thoughts. The more I talk about this, the more I think I should get rid of this, but part of me also doesn't just want to. Like I said earlier in the video, I want to only put time and energy into books that I'm excited about and that I think I will like. And I don't like what I've read of this so far, but the more I look at it, the more I think I'm getting rid of this. It's just not a story that interests me, and even though it's got really cool formatting, I just can't see myself actually enjoying this or wanting to spend more time reading this. So with that, I think this is going into the UNHAUL pile. And of course, that leaves us with the bind up of the first 3 volumes of Full Metal Alchemist, which I think I'm gonna keep. I was intrigued enough by the first chapter to at least give the first full volume a chance. I'm not sure I'm gonna read this entire bind up, but I definitely think I'm going to at least give the first volume a read, which is obviously a third of this, and then see what I think from there. This entire series is made up of 27 volumes, which means 9 of these, which is a lot, but it's not that long in the grand scheme of things because there are so many manga series that are so much longer, and I think I'm intrigued enough that it's not too long and the concept is interesting enough that I want to give it another chance. Which of course also means that I'm going to be keeping this second bind up. So I just need to get 7 more of the bind ups and then I'll have the whole series, which I've been collecting them from used bookstores. So I'm assuming it's going to take quite a while to do that, but that is it for this video. I am keeping 4 out of 11 books because we're obviously including that second bind up, and I'm getting rid of 7 of them. I'm not sure if I'm going to do an official unhaul video where I show these and talk about why I'm getting rid of them, especially since I've kind of done that in this video, and since I'm already doing my TBR shelf unhaul series, I'm going to be unhauling books like in that series. So I'm not sure I want to put all of that into a separate unhaul video when all of my reasoning for getting rid of those books is already going to be in separate videos, if that makes sense. Like I said earlier in the video, I really think that I'm going to do this again. I tend to randomly, or sometimes in big chunks, take books off my shelves and just pile them into a corner and think about whether or not I want to get rid of them, but I think this is a little bit more effective of a method to go through them because I ended up keeping things that I thought I would get rid of and getting rid of things that I thought were going to be no-brainers to keep. Like I said, I really, really wanted to enjoy A Clockwork Orange and I just didn't, at least the first chapter, because, you know, I really don't want to be translating the whole time. So yeah, I think that going forward, this is how I'm gonna do my unhauls on top of the TBR shelf unhaul. And this is just another thing that's gonna help me get my TBR down. And honestly, I think that I'm even more excited after filming this to check out the books that I'm keeping. So pretty successful video overall. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!